Judah Maccabee and four of his brothers decided that they did not want to put up with this any longer because basically the town was captured. And so they wanted to fight back. So they got a small army together as opposed to this enormous army that had taken over Jerusalem. And they had few supplies and very little of primitive ammunition, as opposed to the Syrians had, the best of everything and thousands in their army. So their chances of winning and getting Jerusalem back was slim because of the odds. But the one advantage that they did have is this was their neighborhood in their area, and they knew it well. So they knew they would go into the mountains, and they knew all the good hiding places and the lookout places, and they could see what was going on is where the Syrians did not have that advantage. Well, and they actually fought for 3 years, this war, which is amazing that they were able to carry it on that long. And miracle has it, they won, the small little Maccabean army. And so they drove the Syrians out of Jerusalem, and they regained their temple back and the ability to practice Judaism again. So the little army goes into the temple to reclaim it, and they see how terribly destroyed it is. It looks awful. And they find a little lamp with oil in it, which would be their source of light. And as they're starting to clean during the day and it's getting to be nightfall, they light this little tiny amount of oil that might last that evening. Well, the story of the miracle is that then they woke up and that oil was still burning, and it just shouldn't have. There just wasn't enough, like trying to run a car on, a very small amount of gasoline. And so they clean up the temple again, and it takes them 8 days to clean this temple. And they go to bed at night, and that oil is still burning. They get up the next morning, and it's a miracle. They can't believe it. It's burning the next day and the next day. And for 8 days, that oil lasted to give them enough light to clean everything up. So what's interesting is that originally this story about the battle with the Maccabees in Jerusalem contained no mention of this oil lasting for 8 days. The reason that Jews chose to celebrate this holiday for 8 days was to parallel it with another holiday that we celebrate, which is called Sukkot in the fall. And it's a fall celebration of harvest and joyfulness that there's enough to eat, and that, they brought in a good harvest. So they thought, well, that lasted 8 days. Let's do Hanukkah for 8 days. It didn't have anything to do with this oil and light. But then it appears in a book called the Talmud, and that is a book of teachings of rabbis, in which is used often in Judaism. And so, it's just interesting that it wasn't even mentioned at first. So then the Maccabees, they rededicate the temple. So the name Hanukkah for this holiday means dedication. And so it is the rededication of that temple that they got back in Jerusalem after the Syrians destroyed it and took their religion away. So that's why we have the word Hanukkah. So that's kind of the history in a nutshell, and probably more than most people even hear for the history. So what we do in America, or actually present day to celebrate Hanukkah. There's a lot of things we do that's kind of fun. And so that the 8-day thing in the oil is about the lighting. We've transferred it to the lighting of the candles. I hope you can all see this. There are lots and lots of different kinds of menorahs, but this is a traditional one that you've probably all seen. We probably have in our home 10 menorahs, which isn't, I mean, nowadays that you can get a menorah for children that have like sports, like a soccer ball, a football, in the place of where each candle would go, a baseball. The JCC that had phones and it had texting, you know, I mean, it's kind of comical as to all the different themes that they've come up with. I've seen dog menorahs with dogs on it. I've seen beautiful menorahs. We have one that is made of glass from an artist in Park City. So the only requirement for it to really be a menorah are the 8 candles for the 8 nights. And then you'll notice this taller one here. So there's really 9 candles. And that's because that's the worker candle. And we call the Shamash candle. In Judaism, you do not light the Hanukkah candles or with a match or a lighter. You light the worker candle, the Shamash candle first, and then you light the other candles with the candle. So, and that's what I'll be doing in a minute. So I'm going to light the candles for you. And this is the last day of Hanukkah. So it's kind of exciting because I get to really have the whole menorah full. So if I did this presentation 3 days ago, you know, the 3 of the candles wouldn't be here. So on the first night of Hanukkah, you'd only have the Shamash candle and then just 1 candle. And so it gets prettier each night with more light. And so, and then you say prayers as you light the candles. So I'm going to go ahead and light them, and then I will say the prayers and tell you what they mean. So takes these lighters a second. Another trick is that there's so many different size candles and so many different holders that a lot of times the candles won't stay in. And so what I did before I joined you is you burn the bottom of the candles to get them to stick in there, because they can be extremely wobbly and fall off of the menorah at times, and I didn't want that to happen. So, and if you do it with your family, as we do ours, our grown children come over, and it's nice to give everyone an opportunity, as the candles grow in numbers, to be able to light each one. Uh-oh, I was worried about that one. And start from the left. Am I right about that? I think it's the left. You're supposed to start on one side and go the other. Okay, so I'm gonna hope that I can get this one to stick now. Oh, that's what I'll do. I hope everyone can see that. It's quite pretty. And so the prayers that you say are in Hebrew, and they go as follows. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav Vitzivanu, Ladikner, Shel Hanukkah. And what that means is, blessed are you, O God, ruler of the universe, who sanctifies us with your mitzvot and commands us to light the Hanukkah candles. And mitzvot means gifts. And so, in other words, we're saying that he honors us by giving us things every day, and we're thanking him for that. So I'm going to also take this time. This is unusual that I got, like I said, that I got to light all the candles for you. And there's a, belief that if all the candles go down at once, which is going to be hard to do since you lit the shamus candle first, and this one was lit before this one, if they all burn out exactly at the same time, then they say that a miracle will happen. And then they say all the smoke from all the candles kind of drift up and go up into one. And so I used to read this. It's a picture book, but I think it's personally written more for adults than children, because I'm not sure all children understand it. And it's about all the candles going out at once. And so I'm going to read this, and I'll show you the pictures as I read each page. And I think you'll find it as touching as I do. It's definitely an adult story. The name of the book is called The Time Man's Miracle, a Hanukkah Tale by Stephen Schnurr. So I've had this book for many, many years. And there are a lot of Hanukkah storybooks out there. There's really funny ones called Herschel and the Hanukkah Goblins. That's one of my favorites. We probably have 10 picture books about Hanukkah. This one touches me the most.
Carla?
Yes.
I just want to tell the people that are participating, if you don't have Carla on the active speaker view, you'll be able to see her better if you do that and see the picture. So on your computer on the top right, there's a little layout button, or it looks like a grid. If you click on that, there's a grid view, but there's also something called focus view. And that way Carla will be really big on your screen, and you won't see all of us, but you'll just see Carla. And you'll be able to see the book better.
Yeah, and I'll
Thank you.
real close to the screen. Okay, it had just begun to snow when a little bent man limped up our front path, carrying a tattered cardboard box wound around and around with twine. I was standing by the window waiting for Dad to get home so we could light the Hanukkah candles. "Mr. Hoffman's coming," I called to Mom. She joined me at the window and sighed, and then hurried upstairs for her purse, telling me to let him in. When I opened the door, Mr. Hoffman bowed and asked in a thick accent, "Is your mother home, please?" His eyes were so dark they seemed almost hollow. Can you guys see that? So Mr. Hoffman, and the story is being told by a 7-year-old boy. "She'll be right down," I answered. Despite the cold, he wasn't wearing an overcoat or boots, just a rumpled gray suit and hat. "Aren't you freezing?" I asked, closing the door behind him. "I've been much colder," he replied, laying his cardboard box on the kitchen table. He blew on his fingers a moment and then began untying the knotted twine. "How old are you now, fine boy?" he asked. "7, I answered. "7, he replied, studying me a moment. "So tall. Your parents must be very proud." Mom entered the room holding Hannah in her arms. Mr. Hoffman bowed again and then fixed his eyes on my baby sister and declared, "Such a jewel." Hannah gurgled at him. "Are you working so late on Hanukkah?" Mom asked, glancing at the clock. "A man has to eat." he replied softly, even during the holidays. Just a minute of your time, please. Isn't your family waiting for you? I asked, afraid he was going to delay our celebration. He stared at me a moment and then shook his head and said, I have no family. Before I could ask why not, he removed the top of his cardboard box, revealing hundreds of colorful ties. One by one, he held them up, knotting them around his fingers, draping them over his arms, laying them across the table. This, with a blue suit, would be very nice, he suggested, or perhaps paisley. Though he promised to stay only a minute, he spent almost a half an hour with Mom. When Dad finally came up the walk, I ran out to meet him, asking impatiently, can we light the candles now? As soon as I take my coat off, and he kissed the top of my head, Mr. Hoffman was just beginning to knot up his box as we joined him. Would you have a look, he asked, hurrying to untie the twine. Thank you, Dad replied, picking up the 5 ties Mom had bought. But I don't think I can improve on these. Why don't you join us while we light the menorah? I've already taken too much of your time, Mr. Hoffman said, retying the box. It'll only take a minute, Dad insisted, and then I'll drive you wherever you need to go. It's snowing pretty hard out. Thank you, but I can't. I took Dad's hand and tried to pull him toward the living room and the waiting menorah. But then my little sister began to cry. What's the matter, Hannah? Mom cooed. Mr. Hoffman looked up from the tie box and his dark eyes gleaming. Hanalea, he whispered. He moved a little closer, repeating her name softly. It seemed to calm her. Come, we'll light the candles together, Dad said, laying his hand on the tie man's forearm. Well, maybe just a minute, Mr. Hoffman murmured, his eyes filled with Hannah. When we were all standing before the menorah, Dad lit the shamash, the candle that lights all the others, and handed it to our guests, asking, would you do us the honor? But Mr. Hoffman shook his head and backed away. I can't, he whispered. Let the children. Dad looked at Mom and then passed the shamash to me. While the tie man stood silently in the shadows, I lit the 8 remaining candles and chanted the Hebrew prayer. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who long ago performed miracles for our ancestors at this season. Amen, Mr. Hoffman whispered. Happy Hanukkah, Dad announced, handing me a large box. For the next several minutes, I forgot about our guest, and then I heard Mom ask, are you all right? I looked up to see Mr. Hoffman watching Hannah, his eyes brimming with tears. Excuse me, I must go. It's late, he said. Well, let me drive you, Dad insisted. No, I couldn't. Thank you, he replied, stepping away from us. I wanted to take his hand and pull him back, but before I could, he turned and limped to the kitchen for his box. Why is he so sad? I asked. Mom shushed me, looking toward the kitchen. How come he doesn't have any family? I pursued. Mr. Hoffman appeared in the doorway, his cardboard box under his arm. I had a family once, he answered quietly, a very big family. Well, what happened to him? I asked. Seth, please, Mom interrupted, her cheeks reddening. A sad story, the tie man said. This is supposed to be a happy night. It's also a night for remembering, Dad said, offering him a chair. Please. Mr. Hoffman hesitated, then sat at the very edge of the cushion, resting the box on his knees. Mom and I settled onto the couch with Hannah between us. Long ago, before you were born, he began sadly, I had a boy your age, Shamil, Samuel, as you say here, was my oldest, 7 years, just like you. But he was not so tall. His younger brother, Isaac, was the tall one. He paused a moment, lost in thought. Any girls, Mom asked. 3, he replied slowly. Sarah, Leah, my own little Hanalea. He reached inside his pocket and removed a torn and faded photograph of himself sitting stiffly beside a young woman holding a newborn baby. 2 small girls dressed in white sat at his feet. 2 older boys stood behind him. Why aren't you celebrating Hanukkah with them? I asked. Do they live far away? The Thai man nodded his head slowly. Yes, very far. Where? I asked. They're gone, he replied gravely. I lost them in the war. And there's that old photograph. Mom put her hand to her mouth. How? I asked. How could someone lose his whole family and not find them again? How? He replied sadly. Only God can answer that question. We've never spoken to Seth about that time, Dad said gently, looking at me. Forgive me, the Thai man apologized. Dad took my hand. Before you were born, he began to explain, there was a terrible war. Many people were killed, especially Jewish people. Even children, I asked. Thinking about Mr. Hoffman's family, even children, he replied. Outside, the wind hurled clouds of snow against the window. Mr. Hoffman rose. I must go. I'm sorry, Dad said. We didn't mean to cause you pain. Of course you caused nothing, the Thai man replied softly. They're never out of my thoughts. Of course they aren't, Mom said sadly. Mr. Hoffman bowed and turned toward the door. Won't you eat something with us first? Mom pleaded. How about a little soup? It's so cold out. He looked toward the window and then at Hannah and at me. A little soup would be nice. Thank you. While Mom filled our bowls, the Thai man watched Hannah crawl across the floor. When we were all served, he bowed his head a moment, muttered a brief prayer, and then picked up his spoon and began to eat. He ate slowly, as though he could feel every spoonful warming and strengthening him. After finishing, he leaned toward me and said, before I go, let me tell you a happy tale. In our village, he began, we believed that every Hanukkah was a time of miracles, just as it had been for the Maccabees. On the 8th night, we didn't just light the menorah, but we watched the candles burn all the way down, believing if they all went out exactly the same instant, those 9 little columns of smoke would rise up one to the heaven, carrying our wishes straight to the ear of God. He held his hands, palms up, and slowly raised his fingers towards the ceiling. It had to be all 9 candles, nothing less could travel so far. Did they ever go out altogether? I asked. He shook his head. I never saw it. Usually the shamash died first, then one by one the other 8. He leaned closer and whispered, but you never know. Watch them carefully. Perhaps tonight your dreams will come true. Why don't you stay and see for yourself, Dad suggested. Thank you, he replied, rising. But now I must go. Please stay, I pleaded. Don't you have a wish? I'm afraid my wish is too heavy even for all 9 candles. And he looked at Hannah one last time. Take care of your little sister. Then he leaned down and stroked her cheek. Hannah cooed at him. And for just a moment, the Thai man smiled, his eyes glistening as brightly as the candles. Later, while Mom and Dad put Hannah to bed, I returned to the darkened living room. The 9 candles had burned down to the menorah itself, each one nothing more than a tiny black wick surrounded by a small blue frame. I wanted to shout to Mom and Dad to come and look, but I was afraid if I stirred, one of them would go out before the others, breaking the spell. In the fading light, I silently wished, please give the Time Man back his family. The shamash flickered. Then so did the other 8 candles. I held my breath. A moment later, the room went black. 9 narrow columns of smoke rose from the silver menorah, and a little way above my head, they seemed to join in a delicate braid, rising faster. Suddenly, the room grew bright. I heard voices shouting, "Papa, Papa!" Shadows danced on the ceiling, feet scurried across the floor, laughter filled the air, and then all went silent and dark. And then here's just an illustration of the candles, the smoke. Spring came, and finally summer, and then summer, and finally the cold, but not the Time Man. Every time the doorbell rang, I ran to answer it, hoping to find him standing there with his cardboard box. But he never returned. And not since that snowy evening have I seen all 9 candles burn out together. Still, every year, Hannah and I look forward to the 8th night with special excitement. Sitting before the menorah, our heads resting on our hands, we whisper our secret dreams as the tiny blue flames burn down and disappear in a flicker of light and a whirl of smoke. And that's the end. So obviously, the implication is the Time Man had passed away to be with his family, but that would give him his wish. So like I said, I feel like it's more of an adult story. But okay, so after that, I'll tell you other ways we celebrate Hanukkah. We play a game. Oh, excuse me. What I wanted to tell you first was the idea of gift giving for Hanukkah really was never thought of back in history. But then around the 1920s, gift giving started to become increasingly popular with Hanukkah. And it started to become known as the Jewish Christmas. And the more Jews that came to North America, the more this became popular. And it's really, for us, it's a time to be with family and to celebrate, play games, light the candles, have a big dinner, and just be together, kind of like Christmas. So there are some foods associated with Hanukkah. The most popular ones are latkes, and I don't know if you have heard of latkes before. They're just basically a potato pancake, and they're made with grated potatoes, eggs, onions, but the key is they're cooked in a lot of oil, and the oil goes back to representing that oil that was found in the temple, the original temple. Another food is, I struggle with this word every year. It's a sufganiyot, and it's a really long word for a jelly donut. And so we make jelly donuts because, filled with jelly, because once again, they're fried in oil. And so the symbolism of cooking the food in the oil goes back to that original story. Latkes are great. Everybody likes latkes. We traditionally eat them with either sour cream or applesauce. And a lot of families make a brisket. I made one, I think, Sunday night. And so that's kind of your traditional Hanukkah meal. And a funny thing we do is we play a game called the Dreidel Game. I don't know if you've heard that before. This is a giant dreidel. If you can see, I'm moving the wrong way. And there are 4 sides to it and 4 symbols on it. And each symbol means something. So this one here is called nun. And nun means nothing. And that means, so you start the game with putting a pot of, you can use pennies, any kind of token, candies. I've used beans with the kids before. And so everybody gets the same amount. And so when you roll and you get this symbol, nun, that means you don't get anything and you also don't put anything in the pot in the middle. Then, so I don't know, you can't see, but what you do is you spin it, and then when it lands, this part here that's facing up is the symbol that you would see. Then there's Gimel. That's this one. Gimel means you win everything in the middle. So that's the best one you can get, is Gimel. Hey is this one. And that means you get half of what's in the middle, half of the pot. And then Shin is this one. And if you get that, it's face up, you get 1 bean or 1 candy or 1 penny that's in the pot. So these symbols represent, they are the symbols Nes, Gadol, Haya, Sham, and what it means, again, a great miracle happened there. Once again, referring to the miracle that happened in the temple. So, and you can play it for as long as little. We used to have lots and lots of little, all our friends had small children at the same time, the same age group. And we would organize little groups and have the kids play. And it's so funny with all this technology and all these fancy things, the kids liked this funny little simple game way more than you would think, you know, when they have PlayStation and all that kind of stuff nowadays. So simple is good. Now I'm going to have a guest singer now, and her name, ironically enough, is also Carla. This is Carla Pardini, and she's going to sing the song that goes with this. It's a popular song called Dreidel, Dreidel, Dreidel. So here's the other Carla.
Okay. Happy Hanukkah. It's nice to see you all and celebrate the Festival of Lights with you. One of the things that we do frequently during Hanukkah with young children is play the Dreidel game. And let's see, Carla had a pretty dreidel here. Where'd it go? Oh, here, it's right here.
Oh, sorry.
So Carla had this pretty dreidel, and with the symbols on it that a great miracle happened in Israel. And that's what the symbols mean. But we play a game with that, and it's kind of a spinning game, and children win and lose, and each symbol means something. And so there's a symbol that's called a gimel, and that means give me all of them. Whatever's in the middle of the pot, you get them all. There's a symbol that means shin, that says shin, and that means you win. That means you put one in. I'm rhyming it to myself here, but it's a shin, and it's this one right here. And that means you put one in. So whatever you've got, you put one in the pot. There's another one that's hey, and that means you get half. You get half of the pot if that's what you land on. And then the last one is nun, and nun means you get none. And so it's a very fun game for kids, and they love to sing this song while we play it. I'm a teacher. I'm not a singer. So bear with me on that, but the song is fun, and I love it, and it's kind of catchy throughout the day. So it goes like this. I have a little dreidel, I made it out of clay, and when it's dry and ready, then dreidel I shall play. Oh, dreidel, 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 I made it out of clay, and when it's dry and ready, then dreidel I shall play. And one of the fun things is it spins, and so you can spin it like a top, and you sing this song and you wait for it to drop. And then we sing, it has a lovely body with legs so short and thin. And when my dreidel's tired, it drops and then I win. Oh, dreidel, 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 I made it out of clay. And when it's dry and ready, then dreidel I shall play. And then the last verse we sing is, my dreidel's always playful. It loves to dance and spin. A happy game of dreidel. Come play now, let's begin. Oh, dreidel, 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 I made it out of clay. And when it's dry and ready, then dreidel I shall play. So it's a fun song. You can see why kids love it, why it's catchy, and why we keep singing it year after year and playing the game. Thanks for joining us for Hanukkah. I'll turn it back to Carla now, the other Carla. They call us around here Carla Squared because there's two of us and they get us confused. But thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you up at the JCC at some point when we can all get back together and gather. Thank you. Happy Hanukkah.
Thanks, Carla. Yeah. You are a good singer. I never could. I can't care. So I recruited my boss. Now I recruited my husband, who happens to be a musician, and I am not. And he's going to play two really beautiful songs, Sylvie-Bon and O Hanukkah. And so I'm going to now turn the time over to him to play a couple of Hanukkah pieces. Do you want to sit?
Yeah, okay.
And oh, by the way, his name is not my husband, Mark. Is his name.
But I'm happy being her husband. So that's a good thing. She can call me her husband anytime she likes. These are songs that I grew up with. I very much lived that life that you saw in the Tie Man's Miracle book. Sadly, so many of the survivors of the Holocaust are now passing. There's very, very few left, but I grew up with many of them. And I grew up with the Europeans. I used to think of them because they all had those heavy accents from various parts of Europe. So that story is quite meaningful to me personally, as it represents part of my family history too. These songs, this first one's in English, although there is a Hebrew version of it, and just paints the picture. Hanukkah, Hanukkah, come light the menorah. Let's have a party, we'll all dance the hora. Gather round the table, we'll give you a treat. Sivivon to play with and latkes to eat. And while we are dancing, the candles are burning low. One for each night to shed a sweet light to remind us of days long ago. One for each night to shed a sweet light to remind us of days long ago. Hanukkah, Hanukkah, come light the menorah. Let's have a party, we'll all dance the hora. Gather round the table, we'll give you a treat. Sivivon to play with and latkes to eat. And while we are dancing, candles are burning low. One for each night to shed a sweet light to remind us of days long ago. One for each night to shed a sweet light to remind us of days long ago. Thank you, fan over here. The next song, and I use the word sivivon in this song too, it's another name for the dreidel, for the spinning top. And that's what the name of this song is. This one is in Hebrew. And what's also interesting about the dreidel is that during times when Jews were not allowed to practice Judaism, when it was very dangerous for them to do so, there were ways to do it in hiding. And one of them was the dreidel, because the symbols, the letters, they're Hebrew letters, and they do mean Nes Gadol Chaya Sham. And that way, the others, the oppressors, would not really know that they were celebrating and praying and practicing Judaism. It just looked like a simple child's game, but really it was a commemoration of our religion. And so a very simple little toy like this was a way of carrying on Jewish tradition in hiding. So this song is called Sivivon, the other name for a dreidel, a spinning top, and it translates as Sivivon, spin, spin, spin. Hanukkah is a great holiday, a joyous day for all our people. Nes Gadol Chaya Sham, a great miracle happened there. And I do have to say I jazz it up a little bit. Sivivon, sov, 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 Hanukkah hu hagtov, Hanukkah hu hagtov, Sivivon, sov, 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 Chag simcha hu la'am, Nes Gadol Chaya Sham, Nes Gadol Chaya Sham, Chag simcha hu la'am. Sivivon, sov, 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 Hanukkah Sivivon, sov, 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 Nes Gadol Chaya Sham, Chag simcha hu la'am, Nes Gadol Chaya Sham, Chag simcha hu la'am. Sivivon, sov, sov, Hanukkah hu hagtov, Hanukkah hu hagtov, Sivivon, sov, 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 Chag simcha hu la'am, Nes Gadol Chaya Sham, Chag simcha hu la'am, Nes Gadol Chaya Sham. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I cannot do that, so that's why I had to ask him. So just to kind of wrap it up, for those of you that don't, well, I told you how we celebrate it, but I just thought it is hard to find in Salt Lake, but you can find Hanukkah wrapping paper to wrap your presents for each other. Not a lot of places anymore. Steinmart went out of business. They used to carry it. Target will still carry it. There used to be a place like Party City. They're not around anymore. However, we carry it here at the JCC, but it would have to be ordered online. We also, my house is downright gaudy during the holidays. We put up decorations like on the windows, on the walls, silly things like this. We just, the funny part about Hanukkah, I always say, is why can't they have classy decorations like they do for Christmas? As you can see, this stuff is flimsy and I don't know, I think it kind of looks a little cheapy, but that's all you can get. The candles are beautiful. So, oh, by the way, I wanted to update you. These are not going to burn out at the same time, so no miracle will be happening here this year. Too bad, huh? I guess the miracle will be that 2020 will finally be over. Thank goodness, and a vaccine has come out. But anyway, I just want to thank you so much for allowing me to share this with you. And Marianne and Lindsay, I have your emails, and if any of the residents at the senior centers are interested, we do a large senior Hanukkah luncheon for free every year. Couldn't do it this year. And then that would give you an opportunity to have the latkes. We usually make chicken, but we have the sofganot, and we tell the story again. And so I will send an email out to you, and then you can let the other senior centers know. And if there are any residents that are interested in attending, let me know. We have volunteers that come pick them up, and it's a fun day. So, and I'd love for those of you that have joined me today to come up to the Jewish Community Center next year. We're located across from the University Hospital, not quite as far as Huntsman, up first south. So, and thank you again. It was really enjoyable.
Thank you so much, Carla. I really enjoyed that. I'm a sociology major, so cultures and various traditions are super interesting to me. So
good.
Thank you so much.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, if you don't mind having a quick question and answer. There are a few questions in the little chat box. What is the name of that book?
Oh, it's again, I'm sure you could either order it online or King's. It's called The Tie Man's Miracle, and it is by Stephen Schnur, Schnur. And if you look up Hanukkah books, there really are quite a few. I also recommend, it's a really funny book called Herschel and the Hanukkah Goblins. I can't remember the author on that one. Very funny book. So goblins get outsmarted by Herschel. So it's in the Dreidel Game. So that's a fun one too.
And then one other question is it appropriate to use the menorah other times of the year?
I wouldn't say it's inappropriate. There's just no, we also have, what's that called?
It's just a
It's a candelabra that we use. It just has this, it has 7 for the 7 days of the week.
And then Shabbos candles. Right.
Yeah, and then we light 2 Shabbos on Shabbat. And our Sabbath starts on a Friday night. It's sundown, and we light candles for that on Saturday night. But using the menorah, there's really no other reason to light it.
Have you ever had the candles go out all at the same time?
No, I haven't. Ever since that book that I became familiar with probably 20 years ago, I definitely watch. I find it kind of fascinating, and it's like, wow, what would happen?
One other question that came through: what is considered the most important holiday?
Oh, that's a good question. Actually, I was going to mention that earlier. And that is the holiday that we celebrate every week, and that's our Sabbath. And that is considered the most. And then we have a series of holidays in the fall, generally, but they're always in the fall. And those, we refer to those as our high holidays. The first one is Rosh Hashanah, and that is celebrating the new year. Remember, our calendar is different. And so our new year starts in September. And so we celebrate Rosh Hashanah, and then about a week later, a very serious holiday is called Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement, and you fast for about 17 hours, and you spend your whole time in the synagogue hungry, and they make you stand and sit down and stand and sit down. It's to kind of understand the suffering, and you are supposed to ask anybody that you have harmed or wronged in any way for their forgiveness. You personally go to them. It's not some religions you channel it through God or a priest or a preacher, but you're supposed to actually go to that person and ask for their forgiveness yourself. And then after that is Sukkot, and then there's Simchat Torah, where you start the Torah all over again, because the new year you start reading the Old Testament. So there's a whole series of holidays in the fall that are considered very important. Like I said, Hanukkah is not one of them.
And one other question: if you celebrate Hanukkah with family, do you still celebrate a Thanksgiving get-together?
Oh yeah, they're completely different. Well, yeah, the Thanksgiving's an American holiday, and except it was very confusing the year that one of the nights of Hanukkah fell on Thanksgiving. We typically throw a Hanukkah party, but we went out of town for Thanksgiving, and all of our friends were very upset. It was the first time in probably 25 years that we didn't have a Hanukkah party because we were out of town celebrating Thanksgiving. So it was kind of a real disruption of the holiday. But I guess that's it, unless anybody has anything else.
Does anyone else have any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you so much, Carla, for doing this. It was great meeting you virtually.
Yeah, meeting you.
Thank you for doing this for us. It's been wonderful. So.
And hopefully I'll meet some of you next year. I'd love for you to come up to the Jewish Community Center if you've never been here. It's a beautiful facility. And anyone can come up for that luncheon. You don't have to be a member. So anyway, thank you again. And maybe I'll see you again sometime.